It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We're going to cover a number of issues present in the news today. Tomorrow, as you're well aware, is Thanksgiving, and we're going to make sure that I'll be off. So for those of you that normally listen tomorrow or, our regular listeners, I will not be here tomorrow. I'm going to take the day and spend it with my family. And so if you are a loyal listener, please forgive me, but that is a requirement. So for the record, we're going to cover a few different topics this morning. We're going to talk about the Iranian nuke deal and what a farce it is, because apparently somebody's lying here. I mean, you've got Iran coming out and saying that what we're being told by the White House is not true, that they do, in fact, have the entitled right to continue to enable or allow the development of nuclear material, and that they have the right to enrich uranium as an entitlement going forward. The White House says that's not true. Well, somebody's lying. And I don't know about you guys, but with the track record of this White House, I'll bet it's not the Iranians. So we're going to discuss that a little bit, because I find that disturbing, to say the least, that we are looking here at our own government misrepresenting the terms of an agreement, which, quite frankly, is an important agreement, because word out on the street right now is that the Iranians are working hand in hand with the North Koreans to develop intercontinental ballistic capabilities. Now, of course, that should disturb anyone, but the date that they expect them to be available is even more disturbing, and that would be 2015. So if they are, in fact, developing the ability to launch nuclear weapons intercontinentally that would reach the United States by 2015, what the heck is the administration doing cutting a deal that allows them to continue to enrich? Our second topic is going to be the EPA. Now, for those of you who don't know, the EPA has come out with a boatload of brand new regulations, and they are right now being criticized, but the reason is not that they're coming out with 6,000 new regs, which, I defy anybody to understand what that means and how you're supposed to follow them all. But they also say that these new regulations are based upon scientific criteria and data that justify their positioning, and yet they won't release it. So we're just supposed to take their word for it, right? Yeah, right. No thanks. The EPA is probably one of the most corrupt organizations out there. They are an extra-constitutional agency, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we hit that topic. Our third segment is going to be the Obamacare secret bailout you did not know about. The secret bailout is related to insurers who are, for all intents and purposes, in the president's, quote, fix of the you can keep your plan if you like it nonsense. There is a loophole in there that forces the taxpayers to cover the losses of insurers. Bet you didn't know that. Marco Rubio is breaking the news on that. And he is, I believe, submitting some legislation to block that action from occurring, because we don't know how big that loss could be. It could be in the billions, it could be in the hundreds of billions, it could be in the trillions. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last. The website's supposed to be available by the end of the week. Everybody's out there saying it's not going to be. And so we really don't know what kind of an unlimited blank check this might actually be. Not to mention the fact that there's a whole argument to be made for the fact that the president doesn't have the right legally to go out there and unilaterally start changing law just because he wants to cover his bippy. I can say bippy on the radio, can't I? I think I can. I think I can. Our fourth topic is going to be an important one this morning, and I want you to be aware of what's happening here. You know, I live in Missouri, and the Ozark Scenic Riverways, or National Scenic Riverways, was a takeover of some state-owned property that surrounded these major rivers that are here in our area, and they're very highly sought after for recreational use. A lot of people canoe down them, and they fish on them, and so forth. They ride horses in the area. They do allow motorboats on there, and so forth. And years ago, the national parks took over the rivers and basically took them over from the state, and then via eminent domain, they kicked everybody out for like a quarter mile on either side of the river, essentially, and they've turned it into this, natural wilderness area. The problem is that the National Park Service is now planning on instituting new rules, which will have some pretty draconian consequences on the folks in the area who live on or near that river. And there's another move afoot, and I'm going to talk to you about it a little bit, but basically what we're looking to do is to get that property turned back over from the National Park Service back over to the state. In other words, here's an opportunity for us to do something unique. What's that, you ask? Well, let me tell you. Funny that you should ask. We're going to go on the offensive. We're going to stop sitting here and trying to play defense all the time, and we're going to go on offense. And we're going to demand that the land be turned back over to the state, to our state conservation department. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is an important issue for you to follow, and I'll tell you why it is. One, if we're successful, and I believe we will be, then, and I have reason to believe we will be, by the way. I'm not just pulling that out of my ear. But once we are successful, it may well lay some groundwork for other organizations and groups who have these onerous, National Park Service properties that they would like to get taken back to their state as well. One, it gets rid of, a real pesky nanny. Two, it gives you an opportunity to take control over your own destiny in your own local parks. And three, it's just good to give government a black eye every once in a while. Did I actually say that? Yes, I did, and I don't care. I'm fighting mad about this thing, and you should be too, and you'll understand why when you hear it. Even if you're not local to this area, even if you've never visited any of these rivers, it doesn't matter. This is an important issue for you to be aware of, because this is also part of the overall Blueways, which we defeated them on, and now they're back in 100 other directions. So, it's kind of like, you kill off one rat, and then 100 other rats come pouring out of other directions, and you just, it's like whack-a-mole, right? The minute you hit it over the head, it pops up somewhere else. So, all right, let's get into our first topic on the Somebodies Lyin deal, because somebody here is clearly lying. Iranian officials are saying that the White House is misleading the public about the details on this nuclear agreement that they cut. Now, John Kerry, who I don't like at all, I look at that guy, and every time I see him, my skin crawls. He reminds me of Herman Munster a little bit, in a suit, or a better suit than Herman wore, and the sleeves fit. But what really bothers me about Kerry is he is a lifelong tick. He's the kind of guy that for his entire life, he has been living on the blood and the sweat and the labor and the effort of Americans. He is a useless, empty suit. And yet, for all intents and purposes, the guy holds so much power, and he is diametrically opposed to most things that most constitutional conservative Americans and patriots are for. He is a big government animal. He loves it. He can't make it big enough. He's married to one of the wealthiest women in the world. She's the heir of the Heinz ketchup fortune. They have untold money. The guy has been caught doing stupid stuff, like buying a boat and then housing it in another state so he could avoid sales tax in the state in which he lived. I mean, so what's good for you peons is not, and peasants is not good for me, Mr. Kerry, right? I can buy a yacht that costs millions upon millions of dollars, which I'll probably only visit maybe once a season. But I don't want to have to pay tax like the rest of you peons, so I'm going to move it to another state where there's no tax so that they can't whack me for it. I mean, come on, man. How cheesy and crappy can you be? He's one of the wealthiest people in the Senate. Or he was, but when he was in the Senate. He's one of the wealthiest people in the halls of government. The guy is a shameless... Anyway. All right. Here's the problem. The Iranian officials are telling us flat out that the White House is lying to us about the details on this nuclear agreement. And the reason that they're saying that, and by the way, for those of you who are listening to me who also do a radio program or a television cast, and those of you who don't, I hate when people say nuclear. I know, that's a small thing. It's not nuclear. It's nuclear. Even George Bush and Sarah Palin say nuclear. It drives me nuts. I've heard Obama say it too. But he doesn't say axe. Now, the problem here is that the disagreement comes. This is a 4-page agreement. 4 pages. I mean, it's not like, War and Peace. Well, maybe it is like War and Peace, but not like the novel War and Peace. The Kerry team is saying, and Obama is saying, hey, this blocks Iran from their nuclear ambitions, if only for a 6-month window. That's the term of the agreement. It lasts for 6 months. And after that, they come back and they're supposed to have this new, even more strenuous agreement, which, of course, is an absurdity on its face. In other words, why would you... Let's just analyze that for a moment. The president has come back and said, in 6 months, we're going to negotiate an even more stringent agreement. Really? Okay, so let me just get this right. You're going to free up a bunch of seized and frozen assets to the tune of $8 billion. You're going to allow them to sell gold and silver that they've been trying to move on the market but can't because of these international limitations. And you're going to allow them to sell oil on the open marketplace, which, again, was part of the embargo issues. And after you've done all of that, and you've allowed them to make all kinds of political hay on this, then you're going to institute even a more stringent arrangement than you have now 6 months from now. Okay, I get that negotiation skill. Not. I mean, you got to be kidding me. When you... the absurdity of that is actually laughable. Anyway, the White House on this 4-page document is saying that Iran does not have a right to enrich uranium going forward during this 6-month period. And it is the key component of this entire agreement. However, Iran says, wait right there. We do have the right to enrich uranium, and it's an entitlement that allows us to join the nuclear community. Notice I said nuclear community, not nuclear. And that the agreement not only says that they can enrich uranium, but that it's fully recognized in the draft that's been released to, for them to do their final approval on. Now, the Iranian foreign minister comes out and says on Tuesday he's rejecting the White House's version of this as invalid, and he's accusing Washington of releasing it as factually inaccurate in an attempt to mislead the American public. Ooh, where have we heard that before? Oh, that's right, Obamacare. Oh, that's right, Benghazi. Oh, that's right, the IRS. Oh, that... I can keep going. So, what he's at... And here's his quote. This is the foreign ministry spokeswoman, for the Iranian press. What has been released by the website of the White House as a fact sheet is a one-sided interpretation of the agreed text in Geneva, and some of the explanations and words in the sheet contradict the text of the Joint Plan of Action. And this fact sheet has unfortunately been translated and released in the name of the Geneva Agreement by certain media, which is not true. Now, I'll ignore the fact that the foreign ministry spokeswoman doesn't have the best grasp of English, but okay. She's saying that officials in Iran and in the White House, or I should say that officials in the White House have modified key details of the deal and released their own version, which is inconsistent with the actual terms of the agreement. Here's what they say. This comprehensive solution would enable Iran to fully enjoy its right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes under the relevant articles of the NPT, that's the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in conformity, with its obligations therein. That's what the agreement reads, according to the copy that was released to the Iranian state-run media. Quote, this comprehensive solution would involve a mutually defined enrichment program. There's the key phrase, a mutually defined enrichment program, with practical limits and transparency measures to ensure the peaceful nature of the program. This comprehensive solution would constitute an integrated whole where nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. In other words, it's an all or nothing deal, right? If there's any aspect or portion of this agreement that we can't agree on, the whole agreement is null and void. Iran's objection, of course, to the deal as presented in the fact sheet raises some pretty serious issues about these final talks that are supposed to occur, not only now, but 6 months from now. In fact, there may not be a discussion 6 months from now if this thing doesn't get straightened out soon. Now, the White House did confirm, and by the way, this article is out of the Free Beacon, and so they're speaking in the first person. The White House confirmed to the Washington Free Beacon on Monday that the final details of the plan have yet to be worked out, meaning that Iran is not yet beholden to the 6-month freeze on its nuclear activities. Technical details to implement the Joint Plan of Action must be finalized before the terms of the plan begin, said a senior official at the White House. The P5-1 and Iran are working on what that time frame is. P5-1 is the countries that are negotiating this on behalf of the planet, right? It's Germany, United States, Britain, whatever, Russia. The White House would not provide any additional details on the time frame. Now, the problem here is that, one, the agreement actually hasn't started to run, even though Obama's taking credit for it as if it is. Two, he's misleading us as to the terms of the agreement because it clearly states that they have the opportunity and the ability legally to continue to enrich uranium. Now, if you've got the wherewithal and the ability to enrich uranium, you've got the ability and the wherewithal to make a weapon. And I don't care about the percentages. It's 5% could be enriched to only 20%, but you need 90% to make a bomb. And all. You know what? Let me tell you something. First of all, I don't trust the Iranians any more than I trust the Obama administration. And I don't trust them at all. The Iranians are, by the way, for the record, while this agreement was being negotiated over the last couple of months, and by the way, we also know that for the last year, the administration has been conducting negotiations with them in secret that even the press has withheld from us. Yes, the press withheld the details and the fact that we have been holding secret discussions with the Iranians for over the last year. So this has been going on for quite some time. And while all of this has been going on, the Iranians have been sending people over to work with North Korea on the development of a new intercontinental capable ballistic missile. Multi-stage. Yeah. And they expect that missile to be ready for delivery by 2015. That is a scant 2 years away, folks. In fact, Obama will be in office when that missile gets delivered. So exactly what is it that this agreement states then? I mean, the problem here is a guy who's a executive director for Christians United for Israel. And I don't want to get into the whole question of what is Israel's pressure being applied to the United States to defend them from Iran. I don't want to hear, that the whole media is run by the Jews. And I get all your emails. And listen, I don't agree with it. I do say that the Jewish people have an unbalanced level of influence in our Congress. There's no denying that. But I don't believe that they're the ones who are the secret Illuminati running the world. So for those of you who continuously send me that stuff, you can stop anytime you want. But this guy from the CUFI, David Borg, his statement is that he fears that the White House may have been, quote, played by the Iranians. Well, no kidding. I mean, I wouldn't let President Barack Obama nor John Kerry negotiate a used car deal for me. This may prove to be yet another worrisome sign that the Obama administration was played by the Iranians. Their concessions were either illusory or meaningless, while ours will resuscitate the Iranian economy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, points to what I said earlier, where, excuse me, I should hit the mute button when that happens. This points to the earlier statement I said, which is that, or the point that I made, that, Obama's trying to sit here and telling us that 6 months from now, we're gonna create an even more draconian agreement limiting the Iranians. Well, the truth of the matter is, this will release up to $7 billion. Actually, I've heard figures of as high as $8 billion that have been held over and frozen in international accounts as a result of the embargo. And it will also agree to suspend certain sanctions on gold and precious metals sales, Iran's auto sector, and their petrochemical exports, which will provide them with another rough $1.5 billion in revenue. And then they can earn, in addition to all of that, another $4.25 billion in oil revenue under the deal. And it will release $400 million in governmental tuition assistance that can be transferred to international universities for the benefit of Iranian students who were going to college there. Now, whether that money actually makes it there is a whole nother question. But the problem that we have here is that somebody's lying. And with the track record of this administration and what we now know to be the truth about Benghazi, the IRS scandal, with Fast and Furious, and with the latest Obamacare scandal, not to mention a host of other issues, I got to tell you, I don't believe that the Iranians are the ones who are lying. Now, you can disagree with me if you want, but Iranians are collaborating with North Korea on a rocket booster that really already undermines the deal that they've made in reference to this agreement. Mike Rogers, he's the guy from Alabama. He's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. And he says, quote, while the president was undertaking his secret negotiations, this is over the course of the past year, which Congress wasn't informed of, he had to know Iran and North Korea were testing new engines for ballistic missiles to target the United States. Every day, the president's deal looks worse and worse, he says. Ted Cruz has also come out and thrown it under the bus. That you can expect. But the problem here is, and this is Cruz's input on it. I'll give it to you anyway because I think it's important. This is also a Free Beacon article, by the way. The Iranian regime is clearly demonstrating through word and deed that they have no intention of moderating the behavior that earned them one of the harshest international programs of economic sanctions on record. Relaxing the sanctions now only encourages them to continue their pursuit of nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to Israel, Europe, and even the United States. I hope President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry will consider or reconsider this dangerous policy and add the immediate cessation of their ICBM program to the list of prerequisites that are placed on Iran before any additional negotiations take place. And I got to tell you, it's not only the conservatives that are out there saying that. The problem that we have is that while we're sitting here negotiating with the Iranians, and this is the same game we played with North Korea, and ultimately they ended up with what? We now know they have nuclear weapons. In fact, they've detonated them, so there's no doubt. This is the same exact game we played with North Korea for 20 years. And in the end, they have the nuclear weapons. Iran's been playing us like this for the last 10, and in the end, they're going to get them. In fact, George Will came on, and I saw him on Fox the other day, and he said, and sometimes Will is kind of flaky. Sometimes I like what he says, and sometimes I don't. But he made a very clear statement that I thought was worthy of mention here at this point, and then we're going to take a break. I suspect that it's time we get used to the idea that Iran is a nuclear power. Boom. With all due respect, these countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel, who are up in arms about Iran having nuclear power or nuclear weapons, have a right to be upset. They're within the immediate backpack nuke zone. Drive a truck across the border in Kaflooey. And I don't think that they trust this president any more than you or I. And we've got ample evidence as to why, of recent days, we shouldn't be. The NSA scandal. Need I go through them again? NSA, IRS. By the way, last night, O'Reilly did a hit piece on this thing about the IRS scandal. You know, a year later, the companies that all filed for the 501c4 and C3 tax exemptions, a full year later, 6 months later, not a single one of them, not a single one, has been interviewed by the Department of Justice over the alleged investigation. Well, how do you conduct an investigation without talking to the victim? You don't. That's the point. All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I'm the host here. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the EPA, the new regulations they're coming out with, and how they are perhaps the most un-extra-constitutional agency in existence. They have run completely, totally amok. They are implementing Agenda 21 without congressional review, without popular support. I mean, this is just completely out of control. Somebody has got to rein in this EPA. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick with us. All right. We're back. You know, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has almost become the implementation arm of this administration for extra-constitutional activities related to the implementation of the Agenda 21 system, an agenda which, quite frankly, our Congress has rejected repeatedly over and over and over. And yet this president, in the true dictatorial fashion that it operates, and his entire administration operates, is utilizing the EPA and executive orders to do an end run around Congress. And frankly, I mean, I understand the issue that we cannot impeach this guy because, one, the House doesn't even want to start impeachment processes because, in the end, 2/3 of Congress has to vote for impeachment. And we're never going to get that. This nation is so divided along ideological lines, and the two camps are so divided in terms of whether or not they support this president or don't, that we're never going to get Congress, in the Senate at least, to vote 2/3 majority to impeach this president. I understand why they won't. I also got to tell you that I think it's, you know, with the 2014 elections, there's two things that can happen. One, if the conservatives don't take the Senate back, and they retain the House, of course, and I fully expect they'll retain the House. If they retain the House but cannot win the Senate, there may be enough, although it's got to be done just before the election, but there may be enough motivation to get, you know, a 2/3 majority, but I doubt it. Right now, the Dems are running from this president like he's got leprosy. The other side of this is the constitutional conservatives who should be running, and by the way, I don't know who's running in your given district, but I'm going to tell you this. If they're an establishment Republican, do anything and everything you can to install a primary candidate who will be a constitutional conservative, a patriot, not an establishment Republican. I'm sick and tired of hearing, well, I'm voting the way my party tells me, because your party is not representing us. I don't want a party guy. I want a warrior. I want somebody who's going to go in there and pick a fight. I want more Ted Cruzes. That's what we need, ladies and gentlemen. We need 20 or 30 new Ted Cruzes in the Senate. And we need 50 or 100 in the House. People who are going to say, I don't care what the party says. I don't care if you don't like me. I don't care if you throw me under the bus. I don't care if you don't want to support me. I'm going to do what's right by the constituency that elected me. I'm going to do what's constitutionally required of me. Now, the EPA is out here running amok, slapping us down with 6,000 new proposed regulations. And they've tapped this Francesca Griffo, who's a top staffer at the Union of Concerned Scientists, as their next scientific integrity official. That's a not-for-profit advocacy group that presses for, you know, the green agenda, right? Here's the problem. they're telling us that these 6,000 new regulations are based on science. They're based on, scientific data that they have. I don't know where they got it from. They won't tell us. That's the point. They won't release the scientific data, and therefore there can't be any footnotes to it. There can't be any peer review of any of the scientific data. And science isn't science without peer review. How many times have we seen a guy who said, I did this test, and here's the results of my test, and it's a brand new, newfound thing that will help and change the world of medicine or the world of whatever. And then it gets peer-reviewed by a few other scientists who try to bring the same result about, utilizing the same exact tests, and it fails. Because peer review shows that it's not your theory, it's actual fact. Now, the administrator, Gina McCarthy for the EPA, listen to her statement. And this is a joke, because this has got to be one of the most partisan organizations in the government. And they are acting like the enforcer for the Obama administration, especially related to Agenda 21 implementation right here in the United States. Science is, and continues to be, she says, the backbone of this agency, and the integrity of our science is central to the identity and credibility of our work. Dr. Griffo brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to EPA that will help continue our work to implement the agency's scientific integrity policy. Well, here's the problem. Ms. Griffo is from a not-for-profit advocacy group that promotes the green agenda. So where do you think her bias is going to come down on the side of this alleged science? The problem is that the EPA won't release the science they're basing all and using to justify all of these controversial regulations, including the ones that are necessarily making your electricity rate skyrocket. Yeah, the coal one. I mean, here's an example. David Vitter, he's a Republican out of Louisiana. He's part of this group of senators, Republican senators, who have actually, and listen to the way they phrase this, because this ought to tell you everything you need to know. As part of a deal brokered with Senate Republicans, the EPA has agreed to release more data and improve its overall transparency. Let's just analyze that sentence for a moment. And this is out of the Free Beacon, which is a pretty, alternative media conservative rag. As part of a deal brokered with Senate Republicans, the EPA has agreed to release. Stop right there. The Senate is in charge of protecting Americans from extra-constitutional overreach. When they're not doing it themselves, of course. Why are we brokering a deal with the EPA? Why aren't we saying under subpoena, you're going to produce this documentation and the scientific information and the data that you are utilizing to institute these onerous regulations and justify their existence? And we're not asking you for it. We're telling you, if you don't give it to us, we're going to shut you down. In the next sentence, they say, David Vitter, the ranking Republican on the Committee for the Environment and Public Works, and other GOP members say that the EPA has not yet fulfilled their promise. In other words, they brokered a deal that said, listen, if you want us to continue to support this thing, you've got to give us you've got to release more data and improve your overall transparency. EPA says, sure, and then doesn't produce. Here's the problem. And I want you to think of it in this context. If you went and you said to your teenager, listen, you have been obfuscating to us about what you do when you take the family car. And since it's our car, and you're our kid, and you're underage, and you live under our roof, and we have to watch out for you, and ultimately, at some point in time, since you're using our car, we're responsible for your actions. We're telling you that in order for you to continue to use the car, we want to know where you're going. We want to know that you're not picking up 9 friends and you're all out drinking all night. Because we keep smelling beer, and came home the other night, the fender was dinged. We're a little worried. And the teenager says, sure, I'll do that. And then the next time you ask your teenager, okay, so who are you going out with and where are you going? Oh, that's none of your business, Mom and Dad. At that point, would you say, I'm going to keep these keys? And our prearranged deal, this for that, keys for information, is over. You see, the problem here is that Congress does not have the backbone to stand up and say, we're going to end the EPA's reign of terror on America. The House needs to go to the EPA and say, if you continue the reign of terror, we're going to strip your funding. And we're not going to give you enough money to go out there and make papier-mâché dollies, much less terrorize the United States of America. Vitter's office had a spokesman that came out and said, scientific integrity is a moot point when the science remains secret, no matter who's in the role. There's currently no method to independently analyze or verify their science or its integrity. You know what that says to me? Lock it down. Shut it down. And if they want money, and if they want authority, and if they want to pass a rule and a regulation, they've got to produce the science. Not to mention the fact that they also have to produce the constitutionality and a linkage directly to the Constitution that authorizes them to, 1, exist, and 2, to pass 6,000 hidden regulations that everybody's going to be responsible for, but nobody understands or knows. Our founders said to us that when laws become so numerous that it is impossible for the average man to understand that they exist, 1, and 2, what they all are, and 3, how they impact him, that we have reached tyranny, the level of tyranny that would cause them to overthrow the government again. I declare, we've arrived. You see, you're responsible because ignorance of the law is no excuse. And these EPA regulations are, when I tell you that they're draconian, I'm not kidding around. The EPA is proposing to assert jurisdiction over all tributaries that affect navigable waters. So let's analyze that for a moment. They're saying that they and the Army Corps of Engineers together get to redefine the Clean Water Act and expand the jurisdiction to cover natural and artificial tributary streams, lakes, ponds, wetlands that affect the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of larger downstream navigable waters. Let's understand what that means. Basically, if there's water, they have control over it. Whether it's in a stream, whether it's in a creek, whether it's in a pond, whether it is sitting there underground. Imagine the EPA determining what your liability is for water that runs past your house in a ditch as a normal drainage process. The water that's coming off your roof. Where I live, do you know I'm taxed $2.50 a month for rainwater that hits my roof? I'm taxed for it. As if to say, if my house wasn't there, the rainwater wouldn't land on the ground. What kind of an absurdity is that? I know it's only $2.50 a month. That's not the point. The point is, I have no control over the rain, and I have no control over where it lands. Well, now you've created runoff. No, I haven't created runoff. The water was going to run off somewhere anyway. Well, no, according to our scientific data, some of it would have evaporated and some of it would have leached into the soil, and therefore you are now causing runoff because it's running off your roof and on your driveway and then down into the sewer system. And give me a break. If they have the authority to get jurisdiction over all natural, and here we go, artificial tributary streams, lakes, ponds, and wetlands that affect chemical, physical, and biological integrity of larger downstream navigable waters under the proposed rule, we're sunk. Let's understand what this means. So, you have a pond. And there's a creek that runs into that pond. And then there's an overflow drain that goes out of the pond so that when it overflows, it's got a place to go. And that overflow runs into another creek somewhere down the road that's a little bit larger. And that one runs into another one that's a little bit larger, which ultimately runs into someone that is the Mississippi River. Right now, the Clean Water Act states that they only have jurisdiction over navigable water. Navigable water is the Mississippi River. Rivers you can actually take a ship or a boat on. We're not talking about a canoe now. Navigable. This would expand their jurisdiction to cover all water that actually gets to those navigable waters. And on top of that, it includes the Army Corps of Engineers flood plan data. And they don't tell us what. Is that the 100-year floodplain? The 500-year floodplain? Is it a 1,000-year floodplain? And by the way, the Army Corps of Engineers, in my region, because under the Blueways they were trying to absorb 18 million acres, they increased the size of the floodplain under a redefining of it. And that's what encompassed the 18 million acres. And then they came in and said, see, it's all under the floodplain. Well, yeah, but you just made this new floodplain up. Well, it's based on scientific data, of course. Okay, show us the data. Well, you can't really see that. Do you smell it, folks? It stinks like dead, rotten fish. The agencies say that, quote, tributaries, as defined in the proposed regulation, in a watershed, are similarly situated and have a significant nexus alone, or in combination with other tributaries, to the chemical, physical, or biological integrity of traditional navigable waters, interstate waters, or territorial waters. Now, here's what they're trying to do. They're trying to redefine the term nexus. You've heard me say it many, many times before. Redefinition is how these agencies get loopholes big enough to drive Rhode Island through. And here's how they're going to do it. They're saying that now what creates a nexus is any natural or artificial tributary stream, lake, pond, wetland that affects the chemical, physical, or biological integrity of the larger downstream navigable water. So think about it. The entire wetlands basin, which is the White River Basin that they were trying to snitch in the Blueways, 18 million acres, ladies and gentlemen. That 18 million acres is a wetland that drains into the Mississippi. So in theory, by passing this, they will have the Clean Water Act jurisdiction to expand into that entire 18 million acres. Not to mention, this is only the White River. I don't know where you live, but I'm telling you that it will affect you. Because if you want to look at it from the realistic perspective of what the Mississippi's entire basin is, it covers the entire state on both sides, all the way from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Canada, to the Great Lakes. That would put the EPA in charge of, 40% of America on that river alone. You're starting to smell what's going on here? Then the EPA will be able to come into your backyard and say, hey, you can't wash a car here anymore because that water and the suds and the detergents and the whatever run into the city sewer, which eventually makes the creek, which eventually makes the bigger creek, which eventually gets down to the body of water that's navigable. Agenda 21 simplified, or the implementation thereof. Now, the agencies say that existing science and law first of all, law has to be based on constitutionality or it can't exist, because then it's not a law at all. Jefferson told us that. Madison told us that. Any law which is outside the Constitution is no law at all. It's null and void. Existing science and law also show that a significant nexus exists between adjacent water bodies and downstream navigable waters and interstate waters. As written, the proposed rule will, quote, eliminate the need to make a case-specific significant nexus determination for tributaries or for their adjacent waters, because it has been determined that as a category, these waters have significant nexus to downstream larger navigable waters. Boom, there you go. So the proposed rule, listen to what they say. This is their quote now. Will eliminate the need to make a case-specific significant nexus determination. So in other words, it's not going to be a case-by-case determination. It's going to be a blanket determination that says it's assumed. It's assumed that all water has a significant nexus to downstream larger navigable water. You got to be kidding me. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, their scientific study itself says, quote, intermittent and ephemeral streams, wetlands, and open waters in floodplains are connected to downstream waterways and could be subjected to EPA regulation. Intermittent and ephemeral streams. That means even a dry creek bed. Now, if you live in, Newark, it's probably not an issue. If you live in L.A., it is, because they're going to regulate now all of those drainage courses that empty your city. But when we're talking about out in general America, rural America, non-city America, and I'm talking about suburbs to farms, intermittent and ephemeral streams. Ephemeral, what does that mean? Barely there, wispy, like smoke. Intermittent, dry creek beds. They're only wet and wet weather, right? So wet weather creek, they call them. Intermittent and ephemeral streams, wetlands, and open waters in floodplains are connected to downstream waterways. Wetlands and open water in floodplain. Floodplain is the key operative word there, because everything, if you go back far enough, and the EP and the Army Corps of Engineers defines it as such, is in a floodplain. I mean, look, everything is in a floodplain if you go back far enough. And everything can be in a floodplain if you just simply redefine what the floodplain is and use the Army Corps of Engineers to classify it as legitimate science. What a scam. Their proposed rule is, quote, to ensure protection of aquatic resources and make the process of identifying which are federally protected waters or, quote, waters of the United States less complicated and more efficient. Right. This way it's less complicated and it's more efficient. Everything is waters of the United States, which all falls up inconveniently into their pocket of jurisdiction. Don't you smell the rat here? What you don't realize is that who gets jurisdiction matters big time. And it matters because once the EPA has jurisdiction over all of this water, they are in charge of everything. And everything requires a permit. You can forget ever building on land again. That if rainwater lands on it, you're sunk. You can never fill in a wetland. You can never fill in a stream, even if it's a dry creek bed. You see, the problem here is that we have an ever-expanding definition of nexus. And they define nexus as neighboring waters, floodplains, riparian areas, and wetlands. It includes tributaries that run through wetlands and bridges, culverts, and dams. It includes lakes, streams, impounds, that's a pond, canals, and ditches. Adjacent ponds, lakes, and similar water bodies are all part of this. Adjacent wetlands would now be considered part of their jurisdiction. You see, even if you border or just contiguous to an area that's covered, then they get to cover you too. They get to annex you in. So if you don't live within the floodplain, but you're adjacent and bordering it, suddenly you're annexed in under their control as well. I mean, for criminy's sake, folks, the only thing left outside of the jurisdiction are going to be the top 5,000 feet of every mountain peak in the country. And if they want to take the map of floodplain back far enough to the days of Noah, they'll even incorporate the Pikes Peak. You see, they can tie a chemical, biological, or physical connection to a jurisdictional water supply or navigable water through the most ephemeral, the most insignificant methodologies. And when you incorporate the entire floodplain, you've just given the EPA control over what? About 70% of America. Imagine that. And, worse yet, to make it even worse, they don't have to go out on a case-by-case basis and identify these because it's just assumed automatically. And it's to protect aquatic resources. So to the plant, and we're barring you from any use of your property. And they're defining significant nexus to be basically anything. This is the same agency, by the way, that was just caught with their director using Gmail to hide email so that it wasn't trackable for government purposes. Aha! for accountability. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Obamacare secret bailout of insurance companies. You know, you don't hear about this kind of stuff in the NBC, ABC, CBS, MSLSD, and Communist News Network, and many times even on Fox News. You know why? Because the alternative media is the only source of information out there that is really breaking these kinds of stories. The only time the mainstream media will cover it is when it gets to be so big, so obvious, that no one can ignore it any longer. And they can't pretend it's not a story. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about this Obamacare secret bailout of insurers. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm the host here. And you can find us by going to the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can watch our YouTube videos there after, they're usually up there about noontime or so. You can also find us on Facebook by going to facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can find links to the shows and the podcast streaming and so forth there as well. If you're a Facebook user, please hit the like button. If you're not a Facebook user, you can still visit the page and see the benefit of it. It's a public page. You don't have to be a Facebook user to see any of it. And then the rest of the time, you can go to youtube.com/America's Voice Now, and you can please share these videos with your friends. If there's something about one of these videos that is applicable to you or your friend, share it. All right, we're going to be right back.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're still listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host here. We're in our third segment of Wednesday, the 27th of November. Tomorrow will be Thanksgiving. And if you're caught at home tomorrow because of the bad weather and you can't travel to see family, then why don't you jump on YouTube and watch about 4 or 5 hours straight of AVN? By the end of that 4 or 5 hours, I'll have you so riled up that the top of your head will be coming off and smoke will be pouring out your ears. I have a lot of people that send me email that say, I love watching your show, but I'm so angry when I'm done with it. Well, part of the purpose of what we're doing here is to educate you, but bring to you the stuff that nobody else is telling you, you know? I have people tell me all the time, man, you're like days or weeks ahead in some cases of what the mainstream media is talking about. And that's because I am part of what you would call the alternative media, right? So I'm breaking stories and talking about things, and I'm analyzing and evaluating, and we're trying to identify and point out the slant that's given to you or the misdirection that's given to you, the propaganda. We point it out. We take a story and we tear it apart, and we read you their quotes, and then we talk and analyze. What does that quote really mean? What are they trying to say here? And we dig a little bit deeper than just, superficially mentioning, yeah, it appears President Obama wasn't completely truthful. No, he's a liar. And I'm not afraid to say it. This PC nonsense about, let's not really talk about anything. Let's just make sure everything is high level and bunk. All right. Rubio, story broken by Breitbart, alternative media. Breitbart's a good website, by the way. You should be going there on a routine basis. Breitbart, Washington Times, Free Beacon, right? These are great websites. And they have all kinds of stories up there that you won't see ever on the liberal news. And half the time only on Fox News, but after it's become such a big story, they got to cover it because otherwise they look like they're not doing their job. And even then when they do, like Common Core, they barely just skim the surface, you know? Sometimes Fox reminds me of like when you take a rock and you skip it along the river and it just kind of boop, 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 boop. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The problem that we have with this incident, with what Rubio is breaking here, is he's pointing out that there is a bailout provision in Obamacare buried deep within it. Of course, we had to pass it to find out what was in it, right? That authorizes what's called risk corridors. Talk about language that doesn't really mean what it says, right? That limits the amount of profit that insurers can make, but also protects them from losses. Aha, there's the key operative. We're not worried about how much profit they make. By the way, and since when is the government, how is the government legally allowed to control profit? I mean, is that the United States I grew up in? Is this the one I live in? Are they run in the same country I'm expecting to be called a free enterprise, free market, capitalist country? Yeah, you get the idea. So here's the deal. Buried inside the Obamacare package, the Obamacare nuclear weapon that's been detonated on America, there is the risk corridor section called 1342. And it authorizes the limits of what insurance providers can make profit-wise. And it also limits their losses. Now, the article says, while risk corridors can be structured in budget-neutral ways that protect the taxpayers, this particular bill did no such thing. And the reason they didn't is because after it was passed, they now wrote all the regulations and the administrative rules and the interpretations and all these executive actions the president's taking, and it further clarified. In other words, they took what was a pinhole loophole and they've dragged it open big enough to be the doorway to hell. Because what this says is the president, when he came out and made his statement that you could, you know, I know I misled you. I'm sorry, America. And the temporary you can keep your plan fix, which is to allow you to continue to buy insurance through 2014 at the old plan that you had, right? He left out this important little detail, this little tidbit, this little itsy-bitsy polka dot bikini. And he left it up to the Department of Health and Human Services to acknowledge it in fine print. And here's what it says. And even when you read the fine print, unless you're critically analyzing this, you're never going to understand what it means. Though this transitional policy was not anticipated by health insurance issuers when setting rates for 2014, the Risk Corridor program should help ameliorate unanticipated changes in premium revenue. We intend to explore ways to modify the Risk Corridor program final rules to provide additional assistance. Let me tell you what that says translated. Although we expected that the website was going to work and that health insurers were going to be able to immediately rush in, right, like the waters of the Red Sea, and be able to sap Americans of all their money, they didn't anticipate the fact that they would lose money because the website didn't work and we completely bungled it. So we're exploring ways to modify the risk corridor for them by covering it with taxpayer money. That's what it really says, ladies and gentlemen. And they're going to cover it by passing new rules and regulations, which nobody has any accountability for, because these aren't people we elected. This is HHS and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. These are the same sycophants who are running around spending hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money on websites that don't work, pumping millions of dollars into nonpartisan, navigator groups that are running around signing you up for Obamacare while simultaneously pumping into your mind, your feeble mind, how wonderful the Obama administration is to give you this brand new free health care. They're not telling you, by the way, that when you get kicked into Medicaid, you automatically lose assets because those assets become seizable by Medicaid if you ever use the health services. So all the equity in your home can be stripped and taken from you. Any money you've got in the bank, it can all be taken away. No, they didn't tell you that. And you know what's funny? I've been saying this for months now, and nobody in the media is talking about this. Medicaid has rules. And the Medicaid rules say this: you cannot be on Medicaid unless you're indigent. And if you are found at some point in the future to have access to money, we get to seize it to pay ourselves back. So, yes, you're sitting there in a house that's worth, let's say, a $250,000. You have a $100,000 mortgage. You've been prudent. You've been working hard to pay that mortgage off. You've been making double payments. You're out of work, or your income has been knocked down because you had a full-time job. Now you're knocked down to a part-time job, and your wife lost her job. So combined, you now qualify for Medicaid assistance in the Obama premium scam. Well, guess what? The minute you're signed up for Medicaid and the minute you use that insurance policy, all the equity in your home is gone. That $150,000 that you have in equity in your home's worth $250,000. You owe $100,000. It used to be worth $400,000, but because of the real estate market, it's now only worth $250,000. So now you've got $150,000 in equity in your home, but you're kicked onto the Medicaid rolls, and guess what? It's gone. They don't tell you that. Ask. Find it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the Medicaid rules in your state and find out what it is. But I'm going to tell you right now, and if I'm wrong, I'm challenging you to send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org and prove it. Show me the documentation that says by getting kicked onto the Medicaid rolls, you do not lose the equity in your home. Show it to me. I'll bet you're going to find out an ugly surprise. All your savings accounts, gone. Okay. On November 14th, the American Academy of Actuaries dumped out a statement saying that President Obama's plan to reverse the health insurance cancellations, in other words, his fix to his lie, quote, could lead to negative consequences for consumers, health insurers, and the federal government. Key operative word there was the federal government, because when they say the federal government, when they say consumers, they mean that, your insurance rates could change. When they say health insurers, they mean the insurance companies can win or lose. When they say the federal government, they're talking about a bailout, and that means you're on the hook for it. They added into the end of this statement, costs to the federal government, which is us, could increase as higher than expected average medical claims are more likely to trigger risk corridor payments. So, here's the deal. When the insurance companies are losing money, they're going to submit the loss bill to the federal government and say, here, you owe us. And effectively, this is a blank check because we have no idea how high this bill could go. We don't, and you know why? Because the system doesn't work now. You can't even sign up for it. And even if you could sign up for it, we don't know how many people are off, how many people are on. We don't know how many people got kicked off. We don't know how many people are going to get kicked off. We don't know how many people are going to fall up underneath the new subsidized Medicaid and how many are not. We don't know how many. I mean, there's just so many unknowns. In other words, President Obama's November 14th decree that you can that he's offering the fix. In other words, President Obama's November 14th fix decree can only be implemented if the American taxpayer provides a bailout safety provision that we fund. Wow. Wow. Did you not grasp that? I'll tell you what. There is so much wrong with Obamacare that these Senate Democrats who approved it and the Senate and the House Democrats who signed this bill into law should actually be charged with malfeasance. Why? Well, one, they never read the bill, and they voted for it. So they weren't sure of what the implications were going to be because they never read the 2,000 pages. It's just too lengthy for us, they said. Secondarily, once they did pass it, which was in and of itself the malfeasance, they then handed it off to HHS and literally tens of thousands of unaccountable, subdelegated minions to write regulations for it that they couldn't even approve or deny. There's so many of them, they don't even know. There's 20,000 pages, ladies and gentlemen, of rules and regulations. If they couldn't read the 2,000-page bill, surely they didn't read the 10-foot high stack of 20,000 regulations that, by the way, are actually stated to only represent 1/3 of the total regulatory writings that are going to be done to make Obamacare work. And it's implementing, what, in 30 days, and they've only written 1/3 of the regulations. That means this is an animal that can be added on parts to, stuck on, as, when, and where they need to. Talk about a Frankenstein monster. And we're on the hook for it. We're on the hook for it not only in higher premiums, not only in higher deductibles, not only in limiting our doctors, not only in limiting our hospital access, but we're also then doubly on the hook for the losses associated through it that are going to fall back to us as taxpayers to cover. The only people who are going to benefit from Obamacare are those who are going to get a free ride. That's the simple, raw truth. That is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. And everything else is marketing, hype, and BS. The only people that are going to benefit from Obamacare are going to be those people who had no insurance before. And whether or not they had insurance, they didn't have insurance because they couldn't afford it, or whether they didn't have insurance because they didn't want it, or whether they didn't have insurance because they were irresponsible. In other words, could afford it, but blew their money on other junk. We're all going to pay the price for that. All of us. If you work, if you pay taxes, you're going to pay the price. If you have an income that is above the poverty level, you're going to pay the price. And you're going to pay the price not once, but as many times as they can keep going around on the merry-go-round and slapping you across the face. I mean, every time the merry-go-round turns, they hit you again. You're getting hit for raised premiums. You're getting hit for raised deductibles. You're getting hit for limitations on what doctors you can go to, which means if you want to keep the doctor you had, you got to go out there and cancel, or you got to go outside of your policy and pay them privately and directly. You're going to get hit because there's death panels in this whole thing, and that came out the other day, and they are absolutely death panels. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You're going to get hit because you're on the hook as a taxpayer to cover the losses associated with this to the insurance companies, and then you're fully on the hook because the government is paying for all the ne'er-do-wells and the indigent and the poor and the hapless and the helpless with taxpayer money. So you're getting triple whacked here. I mean, you're getting hit when the bill comes due to cover the insurer's losses under a bailout, and then you're going to have to pay the stupendous amount of Medicaid costs that's going to be associated with this. I mean, a think tank group that came out the other day and said that they are fully expecting that the bill for health care in the United States of America is going to cost the federal government $5 trillion per annum year in 2020. 5 trillion, people. I mean, we're already broke and we're bankrupt already. We already have a deficit of almost $1 trillion. Where are you going to come up with the extra scratch to cover $5 trillion? And you're telling me an economic collapse is not imminent? You got to be kidding me. They're saying next year alone it could be as high as $3 trillion. The T word, not the B word. The T word. Trillion. We're already $800 billion, almost $1 trillion in a deficit hole every year now. We're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar. If you look at the U.S. Debt clock, the federal deficit is already, look, our entire gross domestic revenue product isn't even close to covering our debt now. Or I should say our bills. In other words, we're racking in. So far, we've got federal spending. I just pulled it up here. And you can go to this by going to usdebtclock.org, by the way. I'm telling you, I look at this thing almost every day. First of all, it's amazing to see what the numbers change like. I know that I was doing this show a couple of months ago, and I was telling you the debt per citizen when you were born as a child, your debt was $50,000. And this was a couple of months ago. In other words, a baby born today, or a baby born 4 months ago, was on the hook for $50,000. Today, as of right now, it's $54,221. A couple of months later, people, a baby born in 2016 is going to be responsible for what? $60,000, $65,000, $70,000? That's not per taxpayer. That's per living human breathing being. Our total debt right now is $17.2 trillion. Our federal spending is $3.477 trillion, and our budget deficit is $661 billion right now. I mean, it's stunning to me. The gross domestic product is, our total federal, state, and local spending is $6.152 trillion. You got to be kidding me. Our whole gross domestic product is only $16 trillion. So we make $16 trillion a year as a country, and $6 trillion of that is spent on government. What? The actual total debt, by the way, don't think of the national debt. Think of the total debt, which includes, interest and all this other stuff, is $60 trillion. And when you count in derivatives, the poison, the toxic stuff, it's 714. Okay. Here's the problem. We're so far upside down at this point that sitting here and trying to say to us that we are responsible for bailing out insurance companies on top of all the other responsibilities that we have is criminally malfeasant. And every Democratic senator that voted for this plan should be ripped out of their seat by the roots. If you don't have a senator up for election, but you have state recall capability, then I would strongly encourage you to start that process in your state to remove that senator and remove the House member if they voted for Obamacare. Now remember, not a single Republican voted for Obamacare in either the House or the Senate. Not a single one. So the Democrats 100% own Obamacare, lock, stock, and barrel. I'm not giving the Republicans a pass here because they okayed the funding of it, which they shouldn't have done. Which is, in my thinking, that means that all of them are subject to removal. But let's attack let's take the tip of the spear here and really sharpen it. If you have a Democratic senator or a Democratic House member, remove them. And if you cannot remove them because they're not up for election this year, a lot of senators aren't, right? They do it in they do it in tiers of 2 years each. So you may have, like, my senators in my state aren't up for election until 2016 and then 2018, unfortunately. And we've got Claire McCaskill, the boot-licking monster. 70% of Missouri said we don't want Obamacare. She voted for it anyway. Says it doesn't really matter what you all want. I'm telling you what you want. If you've got a senator like that, we don't have a recall provision in my state. If you have one in yours, grab them by the collar, rip them out by the roots like a bad infected tooth, and dispose of them. And then take some Tea Party and some libertarian and constitutional penicillin to make sure you don't get an infection. Look, the truth of the matter is, it's up to us to start taking action against those who have become not only your oppressor, but demonic in that oppression. You're going to pay for this in so many ways. You haven't even begun to smell the cost of this boondoggle. And all of it, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, so I'm not going to reiterate it and beat it to death again. All of it, because it's not about healthcare. It's all about gathering your data. It's data mining. That's what this is for. It's control of the economy and data mining. That's it. And they really couldn't give a rat's rear end whether you get healthcare, whether you get a needle or you get the chemotherapy you need or the sniffly, runny nose pill you need. They don't really care. Come on, you got to be kidding me. You think these people up in Congress, any of them from either party, really care about you? The only time they pay you any heed or any mind whatsoever is in the last 6 months before an election. Then suddenly they're coming around telling you how grateful they are for your support. But in the Congress's place, they couldn't care less about you for the 18 months before the election. In the case of a senator, it's even worse. They couldn't care about you for the last 4.5 years before, 5.5 years before an election. You can't get them to pay attention to you if you were on fire. And they were standing right there with a full glass of water. And suddenly, now, they want to pay attention to you. Don't be buffaloed by them. They're scum. They're liars, thieves, psychopathic, sociopathic cutthroats. Every one of them. I don't even trust Rubio and Cruz and Mike. Look, I mean, if I had to pick a couple of guys that I really like up there, I'd say it was Cruz and Mike from Utah. I can't think of the last name. But I got to tell you, Rubio here is flipped on. He's like a fish out of water. This guy, bing, bop, bing, bop, bing, bop. You never know what side he's coming from. He's so desperate to give himself a legacy that he can run for the White House next year, or 2016, that, he can't keep himself together. But the truth of the matter is, listen, there's not an honest one among them. Not an honest one. I will give credit to Cruz and Mike Rogers, because Mike Lee, these guys have gone in there and they are warriors for the truth and liberty. And your, Cruz especially. And there's some things he's done I don't like either. But I got to say, he's the guy who stood up there and said, let's shut the government. You know what? Most Americans right now would say, you know what? We should have kept the government shut down if it would have killed this monstrosity. Good Lord, people. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break right now. My producer is going to have kittens if I don't. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the National Park Service, the Scenic Riverways, an abuse and misuse of you and our land, and how they're raging across the nation in concert with the EPA and the state EPA mini-me's to destroy American land ownership, sovereignty, and everything else. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. If this is your first time joining us, thank you very much. You can send me email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. I want to hear feedback from you. If you like or disagree or don't like or agree with anything I've stated here, let me know about it. I try to answer each email individually. Do me a favor, by the way. I get a bunch of emails that say, I disagree with you. Watch this video. And then I click through to that, and YouTube doesn't even have the video on there. Don't do that. Tell me why you disagree with me. Don't give me somebody else's diatribe. That's part of critical thinking skills. You express to me why you disagree with me. I don't want to hear why they disagree. I want to hear why you do. That's your job. Formulate your own opinion. We'll be right back. Boom, shakalaka-laka. All right. This is our final segment this morning. And for the record, this will be our final segment until Friday. I'm taking tomorrow off. I almost never do that, but I'm going to take tomorrow off. It's Thanksgiving. And I don't care whether you like it or not. When I was saying before the break, I don't want you to send me email that has a link to a YouTube video in it or something like that, or a story in it. I want you to tell me why you disagree with me. You interpret it and then write it out. And if you're too lazy to type me a 2-paragraph email, then don't bother communicating with me. But don't send me an email that says, I disagree with you and here's why. And then send me a link to another website or a YouTube video. You got to be kidding me. Are you construing that as critical thinking? I got you there. It's not. If you're trying to tell me that you watched a YouTube video that has set your opinion in stone and concrete and has cast it like basalt rock, I'm telling you, you're not using your critical thinking skills. If you disagree with me or you agree with me, I expect you to take the time to sit down and type it out. Mike@americasvoicenow.org. Type it out and tell me why you disagree with me. Give me reasonable, well-reasoned, articulated arguments. Use a spell checker. That's too hard. Then don't communicate. What do you want me to say? You see, I expect you, if you follow this program, if you listen to me more than once, if you listen to me once, great. Some people do and hate my guts. That's fine. I couldn't really care less. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to influence people, but I'm definitely not here to make friends. And if you don't like me, don't listen. If you don't like the way I propose it, if you don't like the way I couch it, if you don't like the way I analyze it, if you don't like my voice, my face, my whatever, don't listen. There's plenty of other people out there you can. if you're a long-time listener, I expect you by now, after all the proposals I've given you to how to think critically and how to evaluate and analyze this stuff, and all the times I've said to you that your job, your responsibility, is to utilize critical thinking skills, to evaluate both sides of the argument, to come up with reasoned arguments as to why you believe the way you believe. If you can't articulate that to me in an email, but you're going to sum it up by saying to me, well, watch this guy's YouTube video and it'll explain it, we got nothing further to talk about because you have failed. I know that sounds harsh, but you know what? I don't care. Again, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to pass a message on. And the message is, get your poop together. Time's short. And we need you. But I'm not going to mollycoddle you. You know, I'm like that drill sergeant you love to hate. You know, the guy who walks in and instead of walking over and nudging you and saying, come on, little soldier, it's time to get up. We have PT in a few minutes. Little soldier, wake up. I'm the guy who walks in, grabs the garbage can, and starts hitting it with a baseball bat. And you may not like it, but too bad. Then, you know, go find somebody who will say, little soldier, it's time to wake up. Come on now, rub the sleepy eyes. It's morning time. Not. Use your critical thinking skills. That's what this is about. Education, information, motivation, activation. And if none of those apply to you, hasta la vista, baby. Okay. The National Park Service is on a hunt to incorporate a lot of what I talked about in the second segment was the EPA. And they're on this draft plan. They've been working on this 20-year plan for 5 years. I kid you not. They've been drafting a 20-year plan for the last 5 years. National Park Service has taken over the rivers here called the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. And there are 3 rivers in my area, and I live in a very rural area. And these are gorgeous, beautiful rivers. And they're very popular for horseback riding. They're very popular for people who want to canoe down. They come from Kansas City and St. Louis because this is the recreation playground, if you will, in the Ozarks. And years ago, the federal government came in and took that land away from the state. Now, the state held large tracts of it on both sides of the rivers, and, you know, they maintained it as wilderness areas. But there were a lot of pieces of property that butted right up to the river and were owned privately by individuals. And the federal government came in and took it over and said, by eminent domain, first of all, here's a buyout offer. And if they didn't take the buyout offer, then they took it from them at the point of a gun by pointing their gun at them and saying, now, here's an offer you can't refuse, okay? This is how it works. This is what we're giving you. And if you don't like that, we'll take you to federal court. You'll lose because you ain't got no money to fight us. That's essentially what happened, ladies and gentlemen. They came in and by eminent domain, they either bought people out voluntarily or they kicked them out with some prearranged figure that they wanted to give them, which was lowballed. And they renamed it the National Scenic Riverways. They now control it. And they want to now come in and in this oversight position, and they want to go in there, and it's the Jacks Forks and the Current Rivers, and there are entire stretches of this where they want to do a number of things. One, they want to lock down the usage, and they want to eliminate 65 miles of horse trails that are even adjacent to the river, not on the river, just adjacent properties. Well, that horse poop runs into the water, which, you know, according to the EPA, has a significant nexus. Man, does it all tie together in tyranny or what? Tyranny is like a spider web. You know, you can follow one and it, they all connected ultimately. They want to eliminate 65 miles of horse trails in adjacent property to the river, not even on the river. They want to eliminate unauthorized river crossings. unauthorized river crossings. They want to require permits for anyone who wants to ride horseback. Well, what you don't know is there's a great place down here where, and it's kind of a BYOH, bring your own horse. And it's a place down here in Eminence, Missouri, where you can come here with your family and you can spend the week there. You bring your horse with you. You can camp there. And people come from all over the country to spend time here. And what they do is they bring their horses with them. Sometimes, one for every member of the family. So they bring 2, 4, 5 horses with them. And they horseback ride for the week. Now, most of them live in suburban communities where, they can't really horseback ride locally and things like that. And crosscountrytrailrides.com is the name of that place, by the way. If you'd love to go there, if that sounds like fun to you, it's crosscountrytrailrides.com. By the way, my company built that website, so if you want, there's a good example of some of the web work that we've done. If you need a website for your business, send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org, and I'll help you out. I almost never give myself commercials like that, but I'm going to here. Go to crosscountrytrailrides.com. And they have, as sometimes, folks, as much as 1,500 people that gather here. They have 8 of these periods during the course of the year, including one at Christmas. And what they do is they horseback ride. So if they eliminate horseback riding and they require permits for it and they get rid of all these trails, they're destroying her business. And for the record, she provides jobs and gross income and, gross domestic product, if you will, for that area, which is very, 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 low income. They want to eliminate motor vehicle access to the gravel bars. They recently went in and they went to a church that was doing, what do you call it when they dunk you under the water? I just drawn a complete blank. I did the same thing. I drew a blank on cross-country trail rides, too. Just one of them mornings. They want to eliminate all access to these gravel bars. And one of the prime motivators for this was a church that was going in there and doing baptisms in the river. And they would drive, the congregation after a Sunday service would drive to the river, and they would drive down to the gravel bar, and then they would go into the river and do the baptisms there. We can't do that. They stopped it. Well, we got it reversed with a lot of grassroots activism. But my point is, this is just ridiculous, right? They want to eliminate all ATV, UTV, and four-wheeler use, all of it. And it's not just on the river or crossing the river. You're talking about land that moves away from the river for miles on both sides. Miles. They want to eliminate outboard motors in some areas, and then they want to reduce boat motor horsepower limits in other areas. They want to reduce the boat horsepower across the board and completely eliminate boats in some other areas. Now, they've not given us, this is like the EPA. There's no substantial evidence that they have as scientific backing for this. They're just saying that we need to do this. And so what we're saying is, where's your empirical evidence? Well, we don't have any. Well, here's what they want to do. They're going to try to scam their way through this, and they're holding some hearings and meetings. Guess who's at the bottom of this thing? The Sierra Club and other environmental groups, including the same groups who are in charge of the Blue Way. The Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, all of these groups starting to sound familiar? Yeah, they're these international non-governmental organizations that are funded by groups like Agenda 21 supporters, all of these, George Soros-type funded groups. They come in here and they want to dictate what the rules are. Here's what they're planning to do. This is going to kill you. At first they said, well, we're going to hold a meeting down there in Van Buren, a little tiny town. It's the size of a postage stamp, right? It's got a population of a few hundred people. And then we're going to hold a meeting up here in St. Louis. And we're going to get feedback from everybody involved. Well, what they're really going to do is they are going to utilize the Delphi technique at this meeting, and we know they are because they do it routinely. And the Delphi technique says that you go to this meeting and they stand up there at the podium and they announce their plans, and then they pass out a flyer that says, please give us your comments. Then when all the comments come back, they say, see, we have a consensus. And the consensus from the general population says this is what we want. Well, for starters, there's two problems with that. One, the people who live in Van Buren, they're holding it during the middle of the day. Well, this is a farming community. These folks work hard. And they can't take off in the middle of the day to go over there and be berated by some knucklehead in the NPS and the Sierra Club. But secondarily, the population is very low around here. So even if they had a packed meeting, they might get 100 people. The second place they're going to hold a meeting is in St. Louis. And it's very interesting because where they've chosen to hold the meeting is right where the Sierra Club is headquartered, the same town. So they can load it up with their people and then say, see, you only had 50 or 100 people show up at your meeting. We've had 500 show up over here. Well, first of all, since when does St. Louis dictate what we can and cannot do with our rivers 4 hours away? I mean, do you think Chicago, New York, Minneapolis Airport calls down to Dallas and says, hey, is it okay with you guys if we repave the runway? I don't think so. Do you think Mayor Nanny in New York called Chicago and said, what do you guys think about blocking sugary drinks? No. So why is it that a group of people from the Sierra Club, who have actually never even been here, most of them, are going to have some say-so in how to ban and limit the use of the river by the people who actually do live here? Well, they're environmentally conscious. No, you're politically unconscious if you think we're falling for that. What they're going to do is they're going to use the Delphi technique. There's two of these meetings, by the way, and they're on December 10th and December 11th, and we're requesting that people show up for these. There's a couple of people you can call if you want more information and you want to help us fight this. I'm going to give you the information right now. The one is on December, so there's December 10th at the Van Buren Youth and Community Center. That's at 6 to 9 p.m. Then there's one at 6 to 9 p.m. on December 11th at the Powder Valley Conservation Nature Center in Kirkwood, Missouri. Just conveniently happens to be the seat of power for the nature conservation groups, including the Sierra Club, who's the one who's really pushing this agenda. Then they've agreed, by under pressure, by the way, from our own congressional representation, state and federal, to hold another one at the Salem City Hall, but they're going to hold that one from 10 to noon in the morning. And it'll be a Q&A meeting. When you hear the word Q&A, that tells you Delphi technique is going to be in full-blown power. And it also tells you that how is it possible that you're going to hold a Q&A meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning when everybody around here is a farmer and is out there just trying to make sure that either their crops are working or they've got the hay pulled in or they're out there making sure that their cattle are eating. They do offer you a place to put comments online. And so I would strongly encourage anyone who's a listener here to go to parkplanning.nps.gov/OZAR. And I would encourage you to go in there and tell them, stay out. They have multiple levels of this planning thing that they've put together. And one option is to take no action. Then there's another option that has some limited action. Then there's a center option that has, it's like good, better, best, right? The center plan has some more draconian action. And then the third option is like, we own it, nobody gets on it. They're saying, well, we're opting for the middle of the road. So this is the middle of the road policy. What we're saying is take no action. And we're going to go one step further. We're actually putting a movement together, and you can help and participate in this, because what we're going to do is we're going to demand that the National Park Service turn the property back over to the state of Missouri and let our conservation department handle it. We've had enough with the overreach. And so we're going on the aggressive. We're going to give them a black eye. We want the property back. It's not yours in the first place. It never was. And we want it turned back over to the Missouri Conservation Department. Why is this important to you if you don't live in Missouri? I'm going to tell you why. Because you have national parks in your state, and they're doing the same crap to you there they're doing to us here. And this gives you an opportunity to learn from our process and stand on our shoulders to make your job that much easier to do it in your home state. So I'm asking you to participate and help us. Here's what you can do. One, if you want to go, I'm going to give you a couple of names and numbers of people you can call and some email. Mike Slack is one of them. Mike is a great coordinator and a great guy who's been working with America's Voice now for a long time on organizing stuff like this. His phone number is 417-264-2435. It's 417-264-2435. You can also reach him at Mike65807 at yahoo.com. That's Mike at 65807 at yahoo.com. The other person is Don Eagleman. Don runs the Campaign for Liberty group. It's kind of like a libertarian organization. Don's a great fella. You can communicate with him as well and coordinate your efforts, and they can kind of give you some ideas about how you can deal with this. You can reach Don by calling 417-372-7112. That's 417-372-7112. Or you can reach him at doneagleman at gmail.com. That's Don like Donald, Eagleman. And it's spelled like Eagle, M-A-N. Eagleman at gmail.com. Or you can send me an email, and you can ask me for, just put at the top of it, put at the top of it, Park Service, right? Or Riverways. So, and the subject line. So I know what it is. And you can email me at Mike at americasvoicenow.org. That's Mike at americasvoicenow.org. We want to have a ton of people show up and fight this with us. This is how we beat the blue way back. Grassroots effort. And we want an outpouring of community help and assistance. If you cannot participate with us in that way, because you're in, Oregon, or you're in Miami, or you're in New York, or you're in Maine, or you're in Chicago, you can help us. We could use some donations to help the program. If you want to make a donation, you can send me an email to Mike at americasvoicenow.org, and I can give you our P.O. box. The only thing I want you to do is somewhere on the outside of the envelope write Riverways donation, because we want to keep it appropriately tracked. So if you'd like to make a donation in ways that can help us fight this thing, please do so. We need to be able to get some newspaper articles out there and also advertising and things like that to fight back on this. If you want to mail us some donations, you can. The address is America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195. That's America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195. And the town is West Plains, 2 words, West, P-L-A-I-N-S, Missouri, 65775. The abbreviation for Missouri is Mo, like Mo, Larry, and Curly. So it's America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. If you'd like to go to the website for the park service and comment on it and rail against them, please do that. You can go there, and the website address is parkplanning.nps, National Park Service.gov. So it's parkplanning.nps.gov/OZAR. Okay? The reason why we want you to go there, and I don't care whether you're in Bent Elbow, Louisiana, or you're in Far Reach, Oregon, please comment and help us fight this thing, because we need the ability to be able to tell these guys to get lost. It's not their place. It's not, we got to get them out of our hair. And we just beat them on the blue way, and now they're back trying to do it in another direction and hit us another way. This is an environmentalist-driven agenda. They're trying to implement Agenda 21 here for a couple of reasons. One, this is a very low population area. So when you look at it from their perspective, it's already halfway to pristine wilderness, the same wilderness they're looking for most of America to be turned into under Agenda 21. The second issue is it's a relatively low-income area, so they know that they're not going to get a whole lot of federal pushback in terms of legal battles, because they can beat us by attrition. right? Who's got, 50, 80, 100, and $250,000 to launch federal court battles? And they know it. The third issue is that this is a sparsely populated area in terms of its overall human population. But in addition to that, this is there's a lot of folks around here that are just plain country folks, and they don't sit there and watch the news and all of this kind of stuff, and they're not necessarily up on what's going on, and they find out about it afterwards. These are plain country folk here. And a lot of them aren't really politically aware, if you will. And these people in these environmental organizations, they're activists, but with lots of money. And they, get stuff done their way because they can exert all kinds of influential pressure, both lobbying, financially, with donations, and by having influence within the Park Service, the conservation departments, and stuff like that. This is how Agenda 21 is being implemented across the country, folks, and I'm guaranteeing you it's happening right in your backyard right now. You just don't know about it. The truth is, the 3 drafts that they're trying to promote have varying degrees of restriction. We want no action taken. That's the 4th one. And the reason we want no action taken is because we are working right now with our federal representative, our state House representatives, and our state Senate representatives to demand that all of the parks and all of the rivers be returned back to the state of Missouri. And we need some time to accomplish that. They want to pull out 15 miles of roads. They want to, and I got to tell you, there's a lot of national forest around here where I am. And they don't take care of it at all. They don't do any maintenance on it whatsoever. And they have all kinds of restrictions on what you can do, when you can use it, how you can use it. If you want to go camp there, it used to be you could just go camp. Now it's like $8 a day for a camp, for a tent, or $15 a day for a tent. I mean, it's just out of control. So help us fight this, and help us, work through the issues here. You can help us by, one, going on and putting comments in about the article, and having your input and your say. You can also help us financially. I gave you an address where you can make a donation if possible, or if you want to do it through our PayPal account, you can do that on our website at americasvoicenow.org. Just do me a favor and put some kind of a notation in there that I know it's for this fight, because otherwise I won't know, and it'll go into our general fund, which is kind of a joke. But if you're going to make a donation to help us fight this, then please just make some kind of a notation in the PayPal donation so that I know that it's dedicated for the Riverways fight, okay? And or you can mail it to us. And or you can call us up, and you can call any of those phone numbers I gave you earlier, or email addresses, and you can ask us how you can help and participate. Or if you want to come and show up at one of the meetings and raise Cain with us. If you want practice on how to defeat the Delphi technique, hey, baby, this is a perfect opportunity, because we know they're going to use it on us. All right, I'm wrapping up for the morning, folks. Thank you for joining with us and riding with us this morning. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I have something that I want to give thanks for, and that is the overwhelming and consistent level of support and encouragement that I get from you all the time. I know I'm a flea on the elephant's butt. And I'm out there beating the bushes on this stuff all the time. I know I've got a relatively, small audience. I mean, I'm not national. But I got to tell you, I get emails every once in a while that just blow my doors off. And it's touching and it's humbling, but it's also encouraging. And I get people who write to me from over the pond. I mean, I get stuff from the Netherlands and England, and I get stuff from other countries in Europe, and I get stuff from all over the country. And I'm so grateful for your support, and I'm so grateful for your encouragement, because there are days when I say to myself, man, I'm just beating my head against the concrete wall here. But at the same point in time, when I get a letter like that of support, or somebody makes a donation and says, hey, I just catch your program every once in a while, and I think it's worthwhile, and here's a little help. I tell you, to me, I'm grateful for that. And I give thanks for that. And I give thanks for you for paying attention, riding with us in the mornings, listening, sharing, working to educate yourself, utilizing these critical things. And I'm telling you, since I've been doing this critical thinking push, I definitely have seen a difference in you as a listener. The responses I get back from people, the way that you're arguing and placing your points out there, the blogs that people tell me they're writing and that they show me, I see a difference. And I know that we together can do this. And I'm grateful and I'm thankful for you as an audience, because if you weren't listening, I'm just another moot voice. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Have a great holiday. Take care of your family. Find some things in your life to be thankful for, and we'll see you on Friday. God bless you. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web by going to americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page by going to facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And then you can also find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Basically, if you can remember the phrase America's Voice Now, type that into any browser and you'll find. Have a great weekend. We'll see you.